Brrrrap. All right, let's be straight up here. If you've got arachnophobia, this is not a build guide that you want to watch because it's spiders, well, and more spiders. We're going to talk about Nazeebo, the specialist, the one that everybody loves to play, the one who makes all the funny noises. We're going to talk about the talents, the build, and all the way to use the abilities as we go through this. So without further ado, let's get into the talents to figure out why in the world you're going to be afraid of spiders after this. All right, level 1, we're going to keep it real simple. Widowmakers. After corpse spiders attack heroes 100 times, their attack damage is increased by 30%. This is a really big deal because you're going to be spreading the spiders as much as possible. In the early laning phase, trying to land a Q onto a moving hero might be a little bit difficult. If you find them standing near their minion waves, just simply throw your Q onto the minions and then watch it spread to get those quest stacks. Landing this, questing it up, pretty big deal. You'll see the damage over time as you can continue to stack this up. At level 4, you actually have a couple of options, but your number one option probably is going to be Hexed Crawlers. Corpse Spiders restore Nazeebo's health and mana when they attack an enemy hero. Now, if you're having trouble landing these or the laning phase is going to be different, that's fine. This is normally going to be effective in a team fight, so having this in a team fight situation will probably be more valuable than the laning phase. But if you are trying to do that in the laning phase, the secondary option would be Blood Ritual. If an enemy dies while poisoned by Voodoo Ritual, restore 2% of Nazeebo's maximum health and mana. Now, if you're using all of your abilities to try and clear a minion wave, then you're going to find yourself very mana starved. This is one way to make up for that deficiency in mana by using all of your abilities. So Blood Ritual can help in the laning phase, although if you're looking at the overall big picture, you're more patient in the laning phase, go with Hexed Crawlers. At level 7, well, guess what? More of those damn spiders. Spirit of Arakir. If Corpse Spiders hits only one enemy, it creates 2 additional spiders. Now, this is a really tricky way to use this. Make sure if you're using your Q and you're trying to hit heroes, it becomes more of a skill shot if you're trying to hit one to get those 2 spiders. 2 extra spiders, especially after you finish your level 1 quest, is pretty terrifying. It does a lot of damage, and it can be really effective. And we're going to talk about the build as it goes on because it can become more effective late game. But if you're also using this on structures, remember that if you place this appropriately, you can get this to where it hits 1 tower or something like that, creating 5 spiders. So making sure that you use your Q appropriately to proc the level 7 is going to be the way to get the most value out of the level 7 talent. At level 10, your friend, Gary the Gargantuan. Summon a Gargantuan to guard an area for 20 seconds. It deals damage and it does some slowing when it stops. So this is a good way in the middle of a team fight. It really disrupts a lot. It can block skill shots. It's really hard to kill. It can actually do some very unassuming damage to the enemy team, so they got to play around it. They've got to be very careful around this. Make sure you press R while this thing is out so that you can continue to stomp on the ground with it. If enemies are nearby, you can use this to tank stuff late game. It's not on a terribly long cooldown, so it's actually a really effective heroic to use in a lot of situations, so use that appropriately. Ravenous Spirit, while it does do a lot of damage, you become a stationary target and you become a prime target. So if you want to go that route, then by all means, but Gargantuan, generally going to see a lot more value out of it, especially it being on the shorter cooldown and what it can do in a team fight. All right, level 13, there's actually a couple of really good options here. Your number one option, though, is going to be Ice Block. Activate to become invulnerable for 3 seconds, essentially. This is kind of that, uh-oh, something bad is about to happen, and I really need to make sure not to take this damage. Sulfurous Smash coming down, any big heroics, anything like that. You want to make sure that you don't get blown up. Ice Block is a good way to do that. This is on a couple of different heroes, and by all means, it doesn't really make sense on Nazeebo that he's an Ice Block guy, considering everything about this guy says poison, but whatever. Ice Block is the number one way to go. Now, if you are going up against a double mage range comp, which isn't that common anymore, Superstition is really good. Gain 40 spell armor, taking 40% less damage from abilities, but you lose the physical armor, which means that the auto attacks from the enemy team will hurt more. This is a highly situational option, but if you are against a heavy mage comp, Superstition is completely OP. Guardian Toads is a backup option, but Ice Block for that holy crap moment is probably going to be more effective. So Ice Block first, Superstition only if 100% applicable, else Ice Block will get you super value as the game goes on. Well, if you were afraid of spiders already, well, Spider Colony is your level 16 choice. Corpse Spiders' cooldown recharges 100% faster while above X amount of health. Obviously, that's going to be different as the game goes on. So long as you have high health, Spider Colony is insanely powerful. Just sitting there and spamming Qs late game, it's a great sieging opportunity. If you have good protection from your tanks, especially a double tank setup, or you have a minion wave or an objective pushing, stand behind it. Don't move forward to try and land your W. Unless it's 100% guaranteed, you're going to get far more value just sitting there spreading Q, just spamming it over and over again. If you're trying to land your E and your W, and you're taking damage and falling below that threshold, Spider Colony now, the value there, just not that effective. So make sure that if you pick that talent, that is what you go with. All the other ones are nice, but Spider Colony with this build, completely OP. You just have to play it correctly. Now, at 20, Vile Infection is so completely dominant that they had to nerf it to where you now have to have 175 stacks of Voodoo Ritual, which means that if you're playing for level 20 and you're playing for the late game, you have to make sure that you are stacking this from level 1. So keep that in mind, is that, are you clearing the minion waves? Are you making sure to spread your poison to where the minions die so you get those Voodoo Ritual stacks? It's very difficult to reach 175, especially in a pub game, to where you're trying to clear it, maybe somebody clears it before you're able to apply the poison, and so over time that accumulates. Maybe it's a map to where you're not going to have that. Vile Infection, if you feel comfortable reaching this, you'll be able to see your stacks before you pick your level 20 talent. If you're at 100 and you're at level 20, then this is no way a good talent choice to pick. If you're at 150 or you've already completed it, then this becomes one of the most dominant level 20 talents you can pick. So pick that accordingly. Your backup option will be Humongoid. Reduce Gargantuan's cooldown by 40 seconds and its mana cost by 50%, meaning now your Gargantuan is on a very, very short cooldown. You can use it for all team fights. You can probably use it multiple times if a team fight goes on for a long time or contesting an objective. Just Humongoid is a really great backup option if you're nowhere close to Vile Infection. But Nazeebo, pretty strong hero if you can complete the questing talents. The spiders first, Vile Infection second. You become a dominant hero post 20 if you get there. So let's talk about Nazeebo's abilities. I already talked about spiders being the #1 thing about this. You hurl a jar of spiders that deal a little bit of damage, and if it hits at least one enemy, create 3 corpse spiders. Now, if you don't hit anything, you don't get any spiders. So if you're trying to land these skill shots on highly mobile heroes or quick moving heroes, then good luck to you. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. Again, the tip I talked about earlier is that if you're in the early laning phase, just simply, if the other enemy hero is standing near the back of his minion wave, you can throw this to land on the back minions. Now, they won't all turn and attack the hero because that's not how they work, but if he's standing near there, you'll obviously get one of the spiders, maybe 2 of the spiders, to go over and attack that hero. So just trying to completely land skill shots over and over won't be as effective, but if you can land that nearby, or if there's multiple heroes in one area, it makes it a little bit easier, your chances go up. But getting spider value for your level 1 talent, and then moving on through 7 and 16, things like that, will make corpse spiders ridiculous. So make sure and use these appropriately. Don't be afraid to make sure that the circle hits multiple minions when you're clearing that, because it will do damage, and then they'll attack. So it's good for clearing waves. Again, you don't want to use all of your abilities to clear a minion wave, depending on what level 4 talent you picked. You got to be patient with Nazeebo, and I think that's one of the things, is that, yes, he's a specialist, but he's not necessarily going to go out there and light up the minion wave. If you're going out and spamming all of your abilities, yes, you'll get those Vile Infection stacks, but you'll also find yourself out of mana, so make sure and play accordingly. Zombie wall, the bane of everyone's existence until you realize that you can cancel your own zombie wall. For every new Nazeebo player, we know that we put the W down, and we don't really think that you can take it down. If you lock in your allies and they can't get out because you forgot to cancel your W, it's a pretty feels bad moment. Make sure that you understand that you can cancel the W. One of the things that you know that you can do with Zombie Wall is to cut off choke points. If you're playing on, say, Dragonshire and you're near the shrine, you can put it in that bush and choke somebody in or keep them out. Choke points with W is pretty OP. You don't necessarily have to get them within the ring, you can block them with it. And I think that's one of the most underrated things, is that blocking with your W more than, say, locking them in the middle. Obviously, locking them in the middle makes it a lot easier, but that can be difficult. But blocking somebody on a path can be even more powerful for your team to collapse onto an enemy hero. So make sure and use this appropriately. Cancel it if you have locked in your allies. They'll love you. Plague of Toads, well, you create a wave of 3 toads. Now, this is a little bit harder to hit, and generally it's not going to be your #1 way to get damage. Because they spread out in basically a fan pattern, you're only looking to land 1 or 2 possibly. Now, if you have a highly aggressive melee assassin on top of you, say an Illidan, say a Zeratul, and they're right on top of you trying to do auto attack damage, one of the things that you can do is basically shotgun this, a short range spray. So you press E while they're right on top of you, and all 3 of them will explode instantly. It's basically hitting it at the beginning of the cast. It's a really good way to get some really serious damage. If you hit a Q and an E directly on a hero that's right on top of you, then you can make sure and that they will take massive amounts of damage, and they'll be a lot more hesitant to stay on top of you. They might have to retreat. So understanding that Nazeebo has no mobility. If you have Ice Block at 13, great. But if you have your Q and your E available, then one way to do that is to simply make sure that they're right on top of you, shotgun with your E. Outside of that, just using this maybe to clear minion waves, maybe to get a little bit of poke damage in, or interrupting on a channel on an objective is going to be the most value you'll get out of Plague of Toads. It's not bad, but again, trying to do massive damage with this isn't going to happen. So going E build is a little bit more difficult, and that's why Q build is so powerful. Nazeebo's trait, we already talked about Voodoo Ritual. To get that, if a minion dies while poisoned by Voodoo Ritual, you permanently gain 4 health and 1 mana, so it's important to make sure that you dot up everything. You want to try and at least auto attack or spread your abilities around to get that value. It will help out late game to have that high health pool, to have enough mana, and then of course if you go that level 20 talent, it's really good to do that. So making sure that you get that extra damage in, get those extra dots in before something dies will help you out as a hero, and it will help you out late game. So it's a pretty important thing to remember throughout the entire game to make sure and get the most value out of that. Now, one of the key things is that Nazeebo lacks mobility, and in the current meta, people are finding out that you can dive heavily on this hero. Although he is still really, really powerful in the right compositions, on the right maps, there's a lot you can do with Nazeebo. His popularity is high, his win rate is pretty good. So using Nazeebo appropriately and understanding the best ways to use the abilities and to manipulate things with your zombie wall, it goes to the overall strength of this hero. It's such a good thing to use. So make sure that when you're using Nazeebo, you make sure and play him the way that he's intended to be played. Don't try and be overly aggressive and land all of your Ws. Don't try and be overly aggressive and land all of your Es. Simply make sure and play patient, pick and choose your opportunities, and you'll actually find that Nazeebo is really strong. You'll find your damage numbers are really high, and if you land your walls appropriately, you choke people in, you'll also find that a lot of people will be able to follow that up, making the game infinitely easier for you and your teammates. And that's going to do it for this Nazeebo build guide in the current meta. Again, there's not a lot that's changed. Q build is extremely powerful. There's some other options you can go with, but Q build so strong right now. Let me know in the comments what you think below. If you like the video, feel free and hit that like button. Always appreciate that. Until next time, happy hunting. See you again.